Good evening, dear friends, and welcome to this new series of Wisdom Waves. So, basically, what we are doing here is we take a topic and we take one of the philosophical methods and somehow we try to dwell with that topic. So, today we'll be taking a look at the analytical method and we'll be using this in a way to break down the whole theme of the carbon footprint of digital revolution. So we are in this digital age and we are constantly using technologies, constantly using gadgets. So what effect does that have on the environment? What can we do from our part? So that is something that we will take a look today. So first and foremost, we need to take a look at the analytical method. So, what is basically this analytical method? Well, we see that the analytical method in philosophical inquiry is a kind of a systematic approach which involves breaking down complex concepts, arguments, or problems into simpler components for having a detailed examination of those. Now, we see that it is used in philosophy widely in order to clarify ideas, to resolve certain ambiguities which are there, and most importantly, to evaluate the logical structure of arguments. So, we see that first and foremost, it is important to break down the concepts which are present. And this is basically in terms of clarification of the terms, where we clarify the terms and the concepts that are involved in a particular philosophical issue. Today, as we are dealing with the carbon footprint of the digital revolution, hence it will be important for us to break down these concepts and understand what really they imply. Next is also we need to identify components because complex ideas or arguments are in a way divided into basic components. For instance, if analyzing an argument, the premises and the conclusion are in a way separated for individual examination. Next, we see that it also involves logical analysis. Here, in terms of examination of arguments. And therefore, the analytical method involves evaluating the logical structure of the arguments, which means checking if the premises logically lead to the conclusion and whether the reasoning is in a way valid and sound. At the same time, it also involves detecting fallacies. So, by breaking down arguments into their components, we can identify the logical fallacies or errors in reasoning, which may, in a way, undermine the validity of the argument. Now, and the analytical method also involves conceptual analysis that involves exploring definitions and implications. So we see that philosophers will use this method to explore different definitions of concepts and also their implications. So, for example, when we look at the concept of justice, we also need to examine other interpretations of justice and also the consequences of each particular interpretation. Next, you need to also distinguish between similar concepts. And this method will help us to distinguish between certain related concepts such as knowledge and belief in order to avoid confusion in our philosophical discussions. Above all, we see that it is also important to evaluate consistency. There needs to be an internal consistency within an argument or theory. And therefore, this involves ensuring that the components in an argument do not contradict each other. So, if we take example of political philosophy that advocates for absolute free speech as the fundamental right, but at the same time, if there is also a clause saying that it can ban certain types of speech which is deemed harmful to society. So here in this method, when we go to evaluate this, we would have to check if it fails to reconcile these two positions. Okay, so on one hand, it supports unrestricted free speech, but on the other hand, it advocates for restrictions as well. On the other hand, we have consistency with other beliefs. So philosophers also will have to address or evaluate whether a particular argument or a theory is consistent with other well established beliefs. Now, if there is a new scientific theory that suggests that our actions have no effect on the environment, now we will have to make sure that this new theory that I propose is consistent with something, with the research that is already done. If it is consistent, it can be accepted, otherwise it is rejected. Next, we have application to problems. So here, the analytical method, when it is applied to philosophical problems, it also helps us to explore possible solutions. And this is done by evaluating the consequences or the merits or demerits of each solution. Apart from this, it also invites us to reflect critically on our assumptions, presumptions, as well as on the problem itself. Now, what are the benefits of this analytical method? First and foremost is clarity and precision. So once we already have understood each concept or each word that is involved in the term, it also helps us to eliminate any kind of ambiguities, any kind of confusion that we may have. Next, critical thinking. It invites us to go beyond the box, look for errors in uh, understanding, or look for errors in arguments, and also explore possible alternative options. And most importantly is problem resolution. It helps us to, in a way, come to a particular solution. And the limitations are overemphasis on language, where sometimes it can overemphasize linguistic analysis, and as a result of this, we may lose track of the direction in which we're heading. Reductionism is another drawback, where complex phenomena are sometimes oversimplified, and as a result, the original concepts lose their richness. And also, neglect of concept is seen as one of the drawbacks of this method. Now, let's apply this analytical method to the issue that we have taken for today, the carbon footprint of the digital revolution. So, first and foremost, let's take a look at the key concepts. First and foremost is digital revolution. Okay, so this basically involves the quick changes that are happening in the world around us by the use of digital technology, whether it is the internet, whether it is our mobile devices, whether it is cloud computing, or whether it is the use of digital technology for commerce, for economy, etc. Next is carbon footprint. So this refers to the total amount of the greenhouse gases, primarily carbon dioxide, that are emitted directly or indirectly by human activities. And therefore, this is measured in terms of CO2 equivalence, and in a way is a critical metric for assessing the environmental impact. And now we also need to see the intersection of the terms. See, now our main focus here is to see how technologies and practices that are involved in this digital revolution will in a way contribute to global carbon emissions. And therefore, we have to understand the direct emissions from manufacturing these devices, as well as the emissions involved in using these digital devices. Apart from that, we also need to look at the indirect emissions that come from energy consumption, energy that is necessary in order to drive these devices, such as data centers and network services, which have large amounts of computers operating, and computing, which also draws a large amount of electrical energy. Now, let's break down the components of the digital revolution. So first we have the data centers. So these are basically centers that store, manage, and in a way send out data. So these are central to a digital economy. Why? Because they handle everything right from website hosting to cloud computing. And here we see that these data centers require a significant energy for their operation, cooling, and maintenance. Because we see that data centers is not only requiring electrical energy in order to run the systems, but you also need to have cooling systems to in place so that the equipment doesn't overheat. You also need to have internet and other things which also consume a large amount of energy. Next is consumer electronics, devices that we all use, such as smartphones, computers, tablets, which in a way are integral to our digital lifestyle. And therefore, we see that the production, the use, and also most importantly, the disposal of these devices tend to contribute to their carbon footprint, particularly through e waste and energy consumption. You also have network infrastructure, which includes the physical and virtual networks that enable connectivity, particularly through the internet, such as fiber optic cables, satellites, and 5G networks. Now, the construction, maintenance, and operation of this infrastructure also contributes to carbon emissions. And finally, we have digital services, which have made our lives very simple, right from entertainment to buying things or buying even groceries. So, online services like social media, also streaming platforms, and also cloud computing rely heavily on these energy intensive servers and data centers. So, the more data we consume, the more energy these services require. Now, let's examine the carbon footprint of each of these components that we have seen. So, first and foremost, data centers. So here these data centers consume vast amount of electricity, and often this is produced from non-renewable energy sources, which also lead to high carbon emissions. And now their carbon footprint can be linked to factors like efficiency of energy use, cooling systems, and the energy source that they draw from. Also, we need to examine strategies to reduce the electrical consumption or the use of energy from these data centers. Now, this can be through the use of renewable energy or, in a way, improving energy efficiency. With the progress of technology, we see our devices tend to consume less power compared to what they used to consume earlier. And therefore, we see that therefore we need to also develop low energy cooling technologies for these data centers. When it comes to consumer electronics, first and foremost, what is seen is the manufacturing impact. So, the production of electronic devices also involves mining raw materials. Okay, so for example, for silicon for manufacturing of chips. Similarly, also assembling devices, manufacturing other components to build up the whole system also requires other metals and other source resources. All of these in a way contribute to carbon emissions. Also the whole process of manufacturing, transportation, etc. Next, we see that there's also the usage and energy efficiency. So the energy consumed by using these devices during their phase, so particularly through charging and network usage, also adds to their footprint. And as we have discussed earlier, e-waste and recycling. So disposal of electronics leads to e-waste, which can release toxic substances if they are not properly managed. So for example, the toxins from the batteries, etc., can also cause a lot of damage to the environment or to the place or the soil where they are disposed improperly. Next, when it comes to network infrastructure, so the construction of network infrastructure, including cell towers, fiber optic networks, is quite energy intensive. So we see that there are these huge fiber cables that are laid across oceans. Okay, and also there's a lot of technology gone into that to protect it from predators or from other kind of damage. So therefore, we see that also the ongoing maintenance of these requires energy, which contributes to the overall carbon footprint. Next, we also have the energy use in data transmission across networks, particularly now with the advent of 5G, which are expected to increase data traffic exponentially. Also, we see that as these data packs have become more accessible, as they have become more easily available, the amount of energy, the amount of internet that we consume on a daily basis has increased. Earlier, when the internet packs were expensive, there was a rationing of devices. We see that 1 GB of data or 2 GB, we used to try to ration it for the whole month. But now we see that as we have 1 GB or 1.5 GB data available per day, our usage also has increased. Next, we have digital services. So you have cloud computing and AI, which also consume substantial computing power, which leads to high energy consumption. For example, these AI services, uh, for example, use graphic cards in a way for quick computing, and the cooling of all these systems etc requires a large amount of water and energy. Next, we also have streaming and content delivery. So streaming services like Netflix, YouTube, Spotify are in a way major drivers in this data consumption, and therefore these require energy to deliver content, particularly considering today's generation which wants many of the things in high definition and 4K streaming. Now let's identify certain key issues and challenges. First is energy source dependence. A significant challenge is the reliance on fossil fuels to power these digital infrastructures. While we see some companies are shifting towards the use of renewable energy, the overall carbon footprint remains high due to the global energy mix because of our dependence on fossil fuels. Also, we see that there is rapid technological growth. So, a lot of innovation and rapid use of new technologies often outpace the development of energy efficient practices. So, we see that the ratio is not proper because technology is developing at a very fast pace, but we see that our development of energy usage or developing new kind of energy resources is at a much slower pace. Next, also we see consumer behavior. Now we also want latest technology and we want the latest gadgets. So this also contributes to a large amount of e-waste. And many of the times we also don't go to see how we responsibly dispose of our old gadgets. So that is also another factor which is involved. Next, also we demand high quality services, okay, such as 4K, which also increases the energy demand. Next, there is also global disparities. Now, different regions contribute differently to this digital carbon footprint. So we see that developed countries with widespread infrastructure and high data consumption will have a higher or a larger carbon footprint compared to the developing regions. However, even though we are a developing country in a sense, our carbon footprint in terms of data consumption is also very high. Next, we also see that we need to analyze the ethical and environmental implications. So here, one of the things involved is corporate responsibility. So there is also an ethical obligation for the tech companies to reduce their carbon footprint, whether they use renewable or more sustainable practices, or whether it is transparency in their reporting of emissions, or whether they invest more in green technologies. Next is the sustainability of the digital economy. While our digital economy offers numerous benefits, we need to also look at the environmental risks if the carbon footprint is not managed effectively. Ultimately, our responsibility. We play a major role in reducing the digital carbon footprint by the choices that we make. So we can always opt for energy efficient devices, we can reduce our e-waste, and we can also support companies that in a way prioritize digital sustainability. Next, let's take a look at the potential solutions. One is green data centers. We need to explore the potential of data centers that use renewable energy. Now, again, these are not very cost friendly, because the technology that is used to drive them is also expensive. So therefore there is a tendency of people not going in this favor. But also we need to see if the governments can come up with certain kind of relaxations that enable us to invest more in these green data centers. Also we need to discuss innovations in order to create energy efficient devices. Okay, whether it is the ones which we use for our lifestyle, whether our air conditioning or our cooling systems or our day to day appliances. Next, there's also the role of sustainable software development practices, which includes energy efficient coding, optimizing the AI process, and also promoting less energy intensive digital content services. Next, we also need to have the government that is takes responsibility to introduce policies in reducing the carbon footprint in the digital sector. So it can basically set certain standards for energy efficiency, and also it can provide incentives for centers that adopt renewable energy. So for example, we see that when e-bikes were introduced or e-cars were introduced earlier, the government was giving certain amount of subsidies. So can these subsidies be also applied to data centers or other places where they use renewable sources of energy? And finally, now we can take a look at a few questions for our discussions. First, we see is how significant is the role of data centers in contributing to the carbon footprint of digital revolution, and what are the innovative solutions that could be implemented to mitigate their environmental impact. Another question also we can see in what ways do our consumer electronics contribute to the overall carbon footprint of the digital sector, and can manufacturers and we as consumers work together to reduce this impact? Next is, given the increasing demand for high speed internet and digital services, how can the network infrastructure be developed in a more sustainable way to balance technological growth with our environmental concerns? Then what are also the ethical responsibilities of tech companies in addressing the carbon footprint associated with digital technologies, and how should these responsibilities influence their business practices and innovation strategies? And lastly, how can government policies and regulations effectively promote the adoption of energy efficient technologies in the digital sector? And if they, what challenges might arise in implementing these measures? Okay, so we can maybe use these questions to begin our discussions, or maybe we can put forth some other opinions that we may already have. So the floor is now open for opinions, discussions, etc.
Thank you, Lindsay. Anybody has questions can raise probably, then we can have an interaction.
Yes, good evening. It was a good presentation, giving the the present scenario, what is happening with this e-waste. Actually, is that seems to be one thing. The other thing is the hazards, the climatic changes that we are having. We are facing. Actually, they are saying why not one now it is Goa's turn. All those things. It's because of maybe largely contributing this one also. Now, the world intellectuals, they're not aware of it. They're not suggesting to the governments any idea whether the governments are taking, active part in conscientizing people from the lower level onwards. It's not only high class, but from the lower level. But any idea that it is there already, maybe international wise UN some topic has come there. Just to have the wider knowledge.
Basically respond to that, we see that there are, in a way, all governments may not be doing it in a way, but in a way there are certain, uh, I've not come across as such in my this thing, but therefore there are certain kind of policies that they have in a way to use, to in a way incentivize, like see for example, when we as I gave the example of the e-vehicles that we have, even earlier when solar was introduced earlier, there were some incentives. So I think it is only if a kind of petition is made, maybe in the future they may have, um, so when it comes to government laws, we see that yeah, so there are certain kind of internet privacy laws and all which are there, but data privacy laws, but when it comes to this ethical responsibility or digital footprints, we've not come across anything as such.
Uh, okay, maybe I can add something to that. I think one of the most advanced in regulation is EU, European Union. I think they have lots of these regulations with regard to e-waste. But are you able to hear me? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I can hear. I
Yeah,
can hear.
yeah. They have lots of these regulations, but in the sense of they even fine these firms very heavily when there is a violation of these rules. And they also have recycling to lowering footprint. But one question or issue I have with this is, of course, EU doesn't want any e-waste to reduce carbon footprint, but then where are these things manufactured? All the components that are used are manufactured in South Asia or East Asia. Now, in a way, EU is trying to keep the e-waste to hazards outside EU, but a lot of the time, like even not only of this e-waste, a lot of e-waste that happens, they collect it very well. They're managing of the waste, not only of waste, all waste is very well. But where does that waste go? Lots of these ships and containers that come are for disposing in one of these Southeast Asia or South Asia. That is one of the problems. The thing is, we don't have regulations. There was a hue and cry once when there was a dismantling of a cargo container in Gujarat, which had potentially dangerous, which was a cargo container which was carrying these chemicals which are hazardous to health. There is in Gujarat and these places, these what you call dismantling centers, but these are very hazardous to health. That's where I don't know whether our country has, for example, to give, since all of us are from Satini land, when we want to uh, um, get rid of our e-waste from Satyanelayam itself, it's a great difficulty. We don't know what to do with the e-waste that we have, electronic waste or even other waste that we have. We don't know where to because there are some centers, but government uh, installed or government regulated. I don't think we have anything in that regard in India, at least at this moment. That is a big concern. Yes. One more comment, if others don't have, Lindsay, is which you passingly mentioned. Yes, going towards sustainable manufacturing, sustainable uh, management of these data centers. Because, as you mentioned, the data centers are the highest energy consuming
Hmm.
places. Just to give example, our own server in Satyanila, we have to run an AC 24 hours to keep it cool, which consumes electricity when we have such. That is just a small thing that we have. Imagine firms and companies and these data providers having uh, hundreds of servers, hundreds of devices for cooling them to this one. Energy consumed is quite very high. But now, suppose we are going for, say, green energy, whether it is, but the problem for us is it's too expensive. Fossil fuel is too cheap, whether it is running of generators or coal, uh, coal-fired, what you call these uh, uh, grids. All these are cheaper compared to whether it is solar energy or whether
Hmm.
it is wind power energy. These are expensive. That's why very often people will go is for what is cheaper.
Exactly. Just to add to that, Valley, like for example, let's the figures, like for a single Google search, they say requires
Mhm,
half a milliliter of water in energy. Okay, so
mhm,
chat GTP, which is also commonly used, consumes around 500 ml of water for every 5 to 50 prompts.
mhm,
Secondly, also chat GTP's daily power usage is nearly equivalent to around 180,000 US households. Okay, so
mhm,
almost around each using about 29 kilowatts. So secondly, in so we see that this kind of use, like this is just maybe 5 to 50
mhm,
prompts or whatever it is, but if you
mhm,
see the whole world, I
mhm,
mean,
mhm, mhm,
using so many prompts each day, yes, I mean, it is this thing. And as you
mhm,
rightly said, also the use of renewable energy is expensive. So that also then will again increase the costs of services provided,
mhm,
which then again will but with advent of new technology, in a way there is hope. So as we have
mhm,
seen,
mhm,
even electric technology, initially when it came, it was very expensive. Now gradually, as companies find ways of developing it further, the price comes down. So hopefully in the
mhm,
future we may have ways how we are able to. Secondly, when it comes to e-waste, I think when we sell our products, we prefer not to give it to the company.
mhm,
So each company has their own e-waste collection centers,
mhm,
but
mhm,
of the price that we get may be quite lower. So we prefer to give it to some third party where we'll get maybe 1,000, 2,000 extra, rather than
mhm, mhm,
and we do not know then how it is used or how it
mhm,
is disposed of. So that also is another thing that comes as a consumer responsibility.
mhm, mhm.
There was a movie taken in, I mean, Singham, two or three. There are series. The last one is, I think, three. Concentration is on this e-waste. People are dying, and because of this e-waste from the Europe. Well, he was explaining about the rules that they have, but for their safety. Whereas the others, it's okay, we can use them as disposing things. I think that's why I was mentioning UN, the representation from the Asian countries must be there because they are throwing the waste all on our heads. Yeah, thank you.
Uh, okay. You also mentioned about subsidizing. I think that is where governments can really step in.
Hmm.
Uh, for example, which is now stopping the solar panels when we put for above the library were subsidized, whereas now there is no subsidy available
Correct.
for solar panels. that's why it becomes expensive. Perhaps we government need to. That is where one of the things, as Lindsay mentioned, I think next task of the intellectuals is conscientizing people the hazards that are there, that challenges we have towards this carbon footprint, that we consciously make effort uh, towards renewable energy, even though this seems to be expensive, but expensive because government has kept it at a high price. Buying certain things is 18% to 28% GST. For example, buying a projector is 28% GST, so which means you are spending 50,000 price, you are spending another 20,000 extra as GST. So cost becomes 70%. That's where probably we need to go in for more of a less energy consumption, as well as which can need to be subsidized. I think that's where, uh, like this, maybe it's a too small forum that we have wisdom waves of talking about this. This needs to be talked on a wider circle where people become aware of what do we do, how do we reduce this carbon footprint, so that our future generation probably is safer, much safer than what it is now.
Yeah, I think Valley, one of the steps in that is, there are certain UPSs which
Mhm,
also have an app, uh, which in a way tell you how much you have consumed. Okay, so
mhm,
let's see if I can s- share that on this thing. So okay, so let's. Okay, can I all see this?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so in a way, this is basically how it kind of gives. So what is the current status? How many kilowatts are used in a day? Okay, and then also at the end down you will see how much of carbon emissions. Okay, so 3.85 kilos per day, 4.5 kilowatts. So I mean, in this way, if we have or the energy usage as over here, so it is
Mhm,
costing you to 21 rupees a month. So
mhm,
so many trees would absorb this. Some things like this. Now this is done by APC. So if you have
mhm,
similar kind of ways in order to make people aware of what they're
mhm,
using, could help to reduce
mhm, mhm,
in a way,
mhm,
at least. So in a way, if we cannot do something, at least from our part, this can be a small step, I can say, in the
mhm,
direction like
mhm,
that.
mhm.
Next also, maybe we can look at the devices that we are using. See, also there is this whole concept of the number of stars, right? Which come now
Mhm.
in India
Yeah,
when we buy the devices,
five
there are
star
number
or
of
three
five
star.
star or
Yes,
three
yes.
star. So we can basically try to see more energy efficient
Mhm,
by the number of stars
mhm,
that are there. So these small things on our part, yeah. But again, we are
mhm,
restricted by budget restrictions, so that also
mhm,
becomes
mhm,
another issue.
mhm,
Like
mhm,
so.
mhm. Yeah, this is where short term uh, uh, benefits to long term benefits. That's where, as you mentioned about the five star or three star, the last time when we put our ACs, air conditions, three star, of course, is cheaper. But five star, in long term, you're saving more electricity and saving your cost when it goes to 5 years, 7 years. But immediately while investing, yes, three star AC will cost less than a five star AC, at least by a few thousand. But when you calculate over a period of 5 years, the energy consumed in a five star is less than a three star. So we need to look at long-term gains rather than short-term. So that's where we can be that calculations we need to do in order to say, if I'm using an AC for 5 years, 7 years, this is what I will save. I think that's what we need to be aware.
Also, to add to that, the recent laptops are also designed to use less energy.
Mhm.
So the new chips also consume less energy as they would consume earlier. So there is progress being done, but obviously it comes at a cost. So uh, actually, given as we are on the whole question of ethical responsibilities, in a way I think, yeah, there is the responsibility of the government, there is the responsibility of the tech companies, but I think also certain amount of responsibility lies on individuals. Okay, how we
Mhm.
also use, because see, we also require, based on our demands, we have these companies providing also. So I mean, we cannot reduce the lifestyle. For example, see, we cannot say that we don't want high speed internet, we would prefer a lower bandwidth, because obviously we know the difficulties involved with that. So we need to find ways to, find to balance both this technological growth, the demand for energy, as well as environmental concerns.
Lady, any comments?
Nothing really.
Only comment is that you should give 100 Mbps speed.
Yes, without any
Uh-huh.
interruption.
Yeah.
Yes, as father, since I said I could observe all his points, but I'm not able to grasp everything. There was some apprehension is there, uh, but I came to know that there is a danger and there's alarming time need is there that we have to concentrate the wastage that we are coming out of e-waste and everything. And I also the recently when I went with Jones to the shop for even books, waste books, they are giving money when we put it in the shop. But for e-waste, nothing they give. Nothing is there. They said nothing you can do it. You just throw and go. They are saying. So in that I can understand. It is no, we cannot renew. It is not renewable. So from those things I remember, and this is also the individual responsibility. Yes, that is true. When we go by our wants rather than need, really it is difficult. It becomes more when we accumulate those things and many things. And also when we see the industries and the ad that they are giving, it is not need based. That the ad also what they very fancy, very worldly things, and they also make like that only. So I don't know how much the government or other things, other they are very but cautious about these things. So it's a really wonderful for me to understand these things and grasp these under reality. Thank you.
Just to add, I remember during Regency, there was this the electricity department, at least in Belgaum, it was offering subsidies on LED bulbs. So encouraging people to, in a way, use LED bulbs or LED tubes rather than the other normal ones. This was way back in 2016. So yes, there are ways being done. We also see that India has set a target of zero net emissions. I mean, apart India, China, and other countries also by 2030. So that means, yes, there are certain ways, there are certain plans there, but again, how and when and where are they going to be implemented is also, because we see that Ministry of Power, through the Bureau of Energy Efficiency, the BEE, has
Mhm.
also basically initiated number of energy efficiency initiatives, whether, as I said, in household lightings, commercial buildings, and also with regards to labeling of appliances. So, but again, so the target of energy savings against these schemes has been kept to around 10,000 megawatts of avoided generation capacity. So in a way we see that there is, in a way, schemes to promote energy conservation. that they already have. So they also have something called as energy conservation building codes for new commercial buildings. This was already started in way back 2007. So that means the minimum energy standards uh, which are connected to a load of 100 kV. So then also you have a certain kind of things for agriculture, as well as energy efficiency in small and medium business enterprises. So in this way they have had procedures, but again, how is it implemented is not there. I think literacy is one of the ways, so which can be done. And also in a way, if we can conscientize people, would be, I think, one of the effective ways of moving ahead. Now, can we think of certain ways that in a way we, maybe since all of us are from SN over here, can actually reduce maybe our energy consumption?
Uh, if I can come in, one of the ways probably is uh, having a team, those who are interested in having kind of at least when you are buying things, are we looking at this energy efficiency? Not just appliances, even digital equipments. Very often we go for whichever is the cheapest. And I think there's only one Scholastic here. Even Scholastic's mobiles or gadgets, devices. What is our criteria while buying? Is it only the cost? Uh, yeah, you don't have to show your mobile, Joseph. Yeah. Or are we also looking at these carbon footprint uh, concerns that we have? Probably. Maybe we need to conscientize first our Jesuits in a way. First, I do agree. We cannot be buying just because energy efficient and buy 1 lakh be mobile. But at least some kind of a concern and some kind of a, at least some blueprint that we have. I think that may be something that is important. This may be something like this, a forum where we can really think about it and people to guide probably those who are uh, have some knowledgeable in this area need to guide or yeah, something need to be done. Second is in our campus probably is though it is expensive, for example, how we can save electricity or the devices that consume too much of uh, energy. How do we go towards energy saving devices in campus, from electricity to electronics? I think that could be something to think about. Yeah. And many of the corporate companies, they are going towards these sensor operated devices. Because when the person is not there, they automatically switch off. Uh, it's a bit expensive, but I think in long term, that's going to work. That's going to save a lot of electricity.
Yeah, also I think in Europe already way back they were already the technology of using this sensor for the corridors and for the had already come in. So and even slowly it is also coming in into India. So in this way we see that yes, that could be one of the ways where use of sensors could be used to, even for example in the malls they have the sensors for the those stairs which are there. So that also in a way this they could be looked in the future like.
To add that already it is in India, father. It is in front of Valley's room. It is the Dinobili Hall. We have that one, father. Already we
Yes, yes,
started using that.
yeah, that is why he mentioned that. Yeah. Okay, so then if that is it, if there are no more interventions, and I thank you all for. So this is the first wisdom waves that we have had of this academic year. So in a way, obviously, as we move on, we'll take a look at more methods of philosophical inquiry and look at certain of these issues that are pertinent to our day-to-day lives. Okay, so thank you very much for joining and have a very good evening. Thank you.